Welcome back, everyone, to the Sandler Sales Leaders Playbook podcast. Today, we have an amazing guest. This is Mr. James Grant, and he is the president and CEO of Signature Risk Partners, Inc., which he co-founded in 2006. So before that, he was the vice president at Telvist Fund Management, Inc., part of Tel Global Asset Management, which was later acquired by CIBC, where he helped develop and launched investment products and led sales and marketing in Toronto. So earlier, he helped to launch Altamira International Bank in Barbados, focusing on building an international distribution network. So with over 20 years of financial experience and asset management experience, we are very happy to have you here today. So thank you, James, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And we also have Paul Tindall here. He is the president and CEO of Sandler Training in Toronto. So really looking forward to this discussion here.
Good. It's glad you could make it, James.
All righty. So why don't we just get into it? There's going to be a lot of people that would love to hear what you have to say here. So just take us back to the beginning. What is the story, how you got started, and what was your first real sale?
Okay. I didn't know we were going to go back this far, but I guess, my story is probably different from most. Formal education really didn't agree with me, or I didn't agree with it. I guess I was just tired of having teachers and professors tell me what William Shakespeare was thinking when he wrote his plays 600 years ago. And so instead of arguing with them, I laughed and went out on my own. And I started in the investment management business, specifically as a financial planner with a company called Investors Group in London, Ontario. And it was really a pivotal time for me, because I was fortunate enough to work with real experienced people who were happy to take me under their wing, and really act as a mentor for me. And so I learned, what it took to be a salesperson. And we learned the hard way. It was pre-internet. I'll never forget, having sessions in the evenings to do cold calls with my team. And we'd come in after dinner, and our manager actually would get us to stand on our desks, and we'd open the phone book. We'd all pick a different letter, and we'd take turns just cold calling people right out of the phone book. And so that's, really getting kicked out of the nest and into the world of sales at a high rate of speed. So that I suppose is where I really learned how to sell.
That was the eat what you kill business, right?
Yeah, 100% eat what you kill. But it was there, I think it was there that I really learned that that sales, as long as you have a product that you believe in, and it makes it real easy to sort of take the position that I'm here to help, right? I want to get you in the boat with me, as opposed to just kind of laying off a product on somebody and moving on. So it was really more about relationship selling. But of course, the hardest part to that whole process is breaking the ice and developing those relationships.
Right, absolutely. So when you're looking at your business today, right, come up a long time, what does growth mean to you? Is it about revenue, market share, team size, or something else?
Well, it's all of the above. Today I wear probably 10 different hats, but that's what makes me happy and I find most fulfilling. And it means a lot of different things. I think, I've always had the philosophy or mindset that expenses need to chase revenue. So I've never really been an empire building. It's never really been about bragging how many people I work with or work for me. Our management structure at Signature is incredibly flat. So there are no towers. We're all in it together. And, I feel like we've built a really neat culture there, where everybody's ideas and opinions are welcomed and just as important. Of course, without revenue, you can't keep the lights on. So we've got to be focused on that as well. But again, I guess I've been fortunate in that, we've been able to do it in a measured pace. And so we've never really had to kind of take a chance on a product that we didn't totally believe in, and go out and just kind of flog it for the sake of revenue. It's been the other way around, and we've built products that we truly believe in, that we know can help our customers, and therefore has allowed us over the last 20 years to partner with the insurance brokers that we work with across the country.
Awesome.
And so your business, yeah, maybe you could describe your business model. So you are an insurance managing general agency.
That's right.
And do you manufacture, how do you manufacture a product that you take to the MGA, that you take to the brokers?
Yeah, we're sort of a twist on the traditional MGA market. Historically, an MGA has been kind of the last resort for an insurance broker who's trying to provide coverage for a client that's outside of sort of the standard business lines. We've all heard stories about Lloyd's of London insuring expensive cars, or Jennifer Lopez's legs, or transatlantic oil tankers. And so an MGA kind of used to be the place where it was sort of the last call. So an insurance broker might have a client who owns a tattoo parlor or a strip joint, or something that is kind of a little outside of the norms, and they would call an MGA, and that MGA would pick up the phone and say, well, I don't really have expertise in this, but I might have a market that could help. And so, and they put down the phone, and then it rings again, and it's someone from another part of the country with another sort of diverse and unique risk that needs coverage for. But we took the model and kind of enhanced it, and I think sort of more formalized it. So we noticed very early on that that most commercial businesses in Canada were being insured on what they call off-the-shelf generic policies. So, a broker calls Aviva or Intact and says, hey, I've got a customer who owns a golf course, and they'd pull down this generic wording and maybe strap on some endorsements to it to make it fit the risk. And that just didn't make sense to me. So we started very organically, bottom up. We met with golf course owners across the country and operators, and we asked them, specifically, what are you worried about? What is it that keeps you up at night? What is it that you can't buy insurance for currently, you can't get coverage for? And also importantly, what are you prepared to pay premium for? And then we took all of that feedback and hired an underwriting consultant at a group called CGI, and they wrote an insurance policy for us from scratch, specifically for golf and country clubs. So, you go through our policy wording and you'll see references to golf and country clubs and property of members and guests and golf cart fleets and lawnmowers littered throughout the wording. So it truly was made, it's a bespoke wording specifically for that industry.
Mm-hmm.
And we had great success with that out of the gate. Actually surprised myself, to be honest, thinking back to those days. And then it sort of evolved over time. I told you the story about Mike Weir. We were into the golf business, and we were getting some traction and starting to write large and important country clubs across the country. And Mike Weir, that famous Canadian golfer, won the Masters. And one of the things he did shortly after winning was he bought a winery in Niagara and started making Mike Weir wine. And I was going to meet with a group of golf course general managers, and I thought, well, I should take some Mike Weir wine with me and introduce it to these guys, because they need to put it on their wine list. So I tracked down the president of Mike Weir Wine, a guy named Barry Katzman in Niagara, and he agreed to meet with me, and I drove out there and spent the day with him, and he showed me the process and Mike's facility, and we went through all of that good stuff, and I told him what I was up to, and he sent me off with a couple of cases of wine, which was great. But then 3 or 4 weeks later, I got a huge long email from Barry saying, hey, I listened to everything that you said you were doing for the golf course industry in Canada, and I can't find any insurance coverage that's right for wineries. Can you help us? And so, back into the routine we went. We again started at the bottom. Barry got a bunch of owners and operators together, and we went through the very same process with them and incorporated their needs and wants into a custom policy wording.
Amazing. Thank
Wow.
you for that. So,
so those are two major sort of verticals that you started working in, obviously developing a reputation to be highly specialized, probably got referred dramatic level of referrals that can come out of this, or a high level of confidence, even if you didn't get referred, right? You know exactly what you're talking about. Without getting into a lot of detail, did you expand this into other verticals?
Yeah, we have. Today we're 6 programs across the country. The wine thing happened. We released it. We had good success with it. We continue to grow that across the country. And it wasn't that long after that the craft beer revolution came to Canada. We were probably 10 years behind the US, but all of a sudden we started getting calls from insurance brokers who were representing these startup craft breweries, and they had no idea where to get insurance coverage for them. So they came to us, and in the beginning we had no idea how big that industry was going to be. So we just put them into the wine program, and we removed the trellis and the vine coverage and some of that other stuff that wasn't required, but they kept coming. So again, we built another policy wording from scratch for the craft brewers and craft distillers across the country. So we've just sort of taken that, that same process and applied it to industries that are related or that make sense to us, and allow us to be the domain experts in those industries. And I think it's one of the other reasons that it's really worked well, is that insurance brokers understand that they need our help. The average insurance broker in Canada, 80% of their business is home and auto. So they're real experts at doing, getting you insurance for your house or your car, maybe a snowmobile, whatever. But even if they are an avid golfer, they may even sit on the board of directors at a golf and country club. Interestingly, insurance brokers tend to spend a lot of time at playing golf. But the reality is that they don't really know. No one's ever taught them how to insure a golf course. And there are a ton of moving parts and pieces when you start thinking about it, right? There's underground irrigation systems that are worth millions of dollars. There's fleets of golf carts. There's rolling stock fleets. There's property of members and guests. There may be art schedules for all the fancy pictures hanging on the walls inside the clubhouse. There's event liability. They're doing weddings all the time through the summers and corporate events. And so, what we have really tried to pride ourselves on is making sure that the broker is offering the most complete and the best insurance coverage to their client. And so I think it truly has been a partnership between ourselves and the broker. So it's not just a one hit, I got this problem account, I can't find coverage for it, I'll call Signature. We have directed ourselves towards, those specific industry niches.
Amazing. Good job. So what would you say that your vision for sales in the next 3 to 5 years is?
Well, that's the big question. I mean, that's what's freaking everybody out right now, right? AI is changing the world. I firmly believe we are in the middle of the 4th industrial revolution. There is no doubt in my mind that AI is going to change everything that we do. It wasn't that long ago where the only place you saw AI was on a deck. Somebody was talking about, a tech company was talking about how they were working on developing AI, and we're gonna start to release the benefits of it. But it's here now, and it's real, and it's growing exponentially. And I think if you're not thinking about ways to leverage it, you're gonna get left behind in the dust. For us, what does it mean? We're underwriters as well as relationship managers. So all of our team kind of wear both those hats. And I can't imagine that there's a human being on the planet that will be able to underwrite better than a trained AI, probably over the next 6 to 12 months. So the relationship side becomes more and more important as we're working with insurance brokers, because everybody needs that human touch, and particularly when there's a loss. When something goes wrong at a golf course or a winery or brewery, the first person they call is their broker, and that's where they really earn their commission. And I think that relationship will always be important. And so, we continue to really be sort of focused on building those relationships. And at the same time, leveraging technology as much as we can. We've probably built 30 or 40 workflows. We use a lot of machine learning. We're starting to use AI in our workflows. I'm very cautious about it. I'm aware that these machines can hallucinate and they'll lie to you. But but there still is a lot of power to be harnessed there. And so we're gently kind of putting a toe in the water so that we can keep up with everything that's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
You don't deal. Do you deal directly with the end user, or is it
No, we don't.
only through the broker? The broker is your client, and they deal with the end user.
And that was a very conscious decision. That's a great question. That was a very conscious decision that we made early on, because we are technically licensed as an insurance broker across the country. But we decided, that, well, we recognize, first of all, that relationships are important, and that, the general manager at a golf course has probably a long-standing relationship with their insurance broker, and they don't want to have to fire their insurance broker just to get better insurance coverage. They trust that person and they've worked with them for years. And so, we decided long ago that we were never going to compete with the insurance brokers who we rely on to distribute our products. Some of our peers have tried that to varying degrees of success, but that was never our intention, and we leave it. It's not up to us to decide or to dictate to a golf course or a winery what the value of their clubhouse or their tasting facility is. We leave that to the experts, to the brokers.
Got it.
Interesting. Yep.
So that said, how are you generating leads? Like, what is working really well right now to generate leads?
Yeah.
And even more, how do you find that it's changed and will be changing?
I think the more it changes, the more it kind of reaffirms the importance of that personal relationship, that human relationship. And I think, we are probably different from our peers in that we decided early on to partner with associations. So we work with the National Golf Course Owners Association of Canada. We work with the Wine Council of Ontario, the BC Grape Growers, the Canadian Camping and RV Association, et cetera. And the way we've kind of gone about that is to position ourselves as, like, we know what goes wrong. We know what can go wrong at a golf course. We know what happens at campgrounds. We know what happens at wineries. Why don't you let us share some of that experience with your membership and help them become better risk managers? And in return, all we ask is that the membership, when it comes time for their renewal, that they ask their insurance broker to come and get a quote from Signature. So although we value that relationship with the broker highly, it's always been important to us to also have visibility with the actual operators in the industries in which we work.
Got it. So
okay, it comes through the associations. Then it comes through these leads, for lack of a better word, obviously come through the brokers, because that's their job, is to prospect for this.
Yeah, all we can do is make the public aware that we're here. And, I think the best way, only experts give away free advice. You guys know that better than anyone else. And so by aligning ourselves with an association, that presents an opportunity to maybe sponsor some of the things that they're working on. They're always tight for money. Who isn't these days? And so if there's an opportunity for us to contribute towards a national conference or, a big event that they're having annually, and then in exchange, we also ask for an opportunity to speak at their events, so that, again, we can kind of share what we've learned through insuring all of them over the years. But, the goal again there is to make them better risk managers. And if at the end of the day they decide that, what they heard from us makes sense, then maybe they will impress upon the broker that they want to get a quote from us.
Makes sense. So you're basically, in a way, exchanging value for value.
I hope so. I like to think so. I mean, that certainly is the goal, for sure.
Great. So now, sorry, did you have a question, Paul?
Yeah, no. So are you still building your broker base, or do you have a really, you get a ton of business from the brokers that you work with, and you're happy with growth of the brokerages that you're working with? I've got actually a couple of questions. That would be one of them. The second would be, do you have are your brokers kind of categorized into, for lack of a better word, A, B, C type brokers, where you've got 20% of brokers doing 80% of the business? Does that really work in your world, or is it some other some other statistic, like Pareto principle kind of thing.
Yeah. It's probably closer to 90-10 overall, but I think that's the way it is everywhere in life these days, right? 10% of the people are doing 90% of the work. I think the goal would be to work with as few brokers as possible just to keep our lives simple. But the reality is that none of the industries that we specialize in can be defined as true classes of business. So, I talked about the home and auto. If we were in the home and auto space, we could probably partner with 50 brokers across the country and write all the business we ever wanted. But the reality is that the average insurance broker, their office probably writes one or two golf courses. So in order for us to get to scale and to become the largest in Canada where we are today, we've had to work with a varying number of brokers across the country, from alpha houses like the Aons and the Marshes and the Hubs and Westlands, all the way kind of down to the John Smith and Sons, in little tiny town Ontario. But again, what we have learned is that none of them really truly understand, and I don't blame them for it, what it takes to insure properly a golf course or a winery. I mean, unless you're making wine or you're a supervisor at a golf course, how can you really understand what the exposures are? So, they need us, whether they're out at one of those big alpha houses or at a small facility, and it's worked out really well because of that.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Good job.
Another question that I would have is, and this may be completely irrelevant, but of the 90% of the brokers that are doing 10% of the business, that could probably be further categorized into A versus B versus C, right? So that people, say, that are near the top of that 90% that do only 10% of the business, are you trying to move them up to a higher level? Are you, or there's just you're wasting time and it's just never going to happen, and you got what you got?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, all of the brokerages clearly have very different sort of styles and cultures. And there are some that are easier to work with than others. And by that, I simply mean, who are on top of getting renewal documents together, who are on top of planning for upcoming renewals, who, are asking the right questions, who are, going through the exercise of revaluing buildings and property every year at renewal, which is particularly important given the environment we're in today, especially in Canada, where inflation rates are, double digits and with no end in sight. I mean, the reality is that a building that, an owner put up 15 years ago for $250,000, if that thing were to burn down, heaven forbid, or, whatever, to replace it is probably going to be $1 million plus. So, it takes a good broker to really ask those tough questions and impress upon their client that they need to be going through this exercise and need to be constantly working on limits, et cetera. But those brokers, they can be at a small firm or they can be at a large firm. There doesn't seem to be, I mean, I wish I could target, the 400 best insurance brokers in Canada and only work with them, but we can't because, again, those relationships are really important, and we want to honor and respect those.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, taking a look ahead to the next 12 to 24 months, realistically, what would you say is the biggest growth transformation opportunity, but also what would you say is the biggest risk?
Well, I'll start with the risk. The biggest risk, of course, is the Canadian economy. We may well be in depression now, and it doesn't seem like there's any light at the end of the tunnel just yet. I know there's a lot of big hope in our current leadership, but we haven't yet seen anything that sort of would indicate that we're turning things around. You're watching the housing market implode. We're watching consumer debt levels go through the roof. So, if you're a golf course, even golf courses who had the real gift of COVID, which is a really interesting story because when we started in the industry with golf courses in 2007, nobody wanted to play golf. They were talking like road biking, cycling became popular. I don't know if you remember, and people were talking about how cycling was the new golf because I don't want to sit in the car for an hour and drive to a golf, and then it's 5 hours on the course, and my whole day's gone. And golf courses were selling like crazy to developers back then. They almost couldn't give them away. And then along came COVID, and remarkably, man, it is kind of funny to think back to those COVID times, how crazy that really was. But in the infinite wisdom of some government, they decided that golf was the only sport you could play. I mean, they were literally going out and taking basketball nets down in public parks because they didn't want kids throwing balls around. But it was okay to go golfing. And if you remember, the other thing that happened back then was they closed summer camps. And so parents immediately put their kids into golf camps because that was the only thing you could do to keep them occupied in the summer. Well, that's translated now. It's stuck. And golf has now become one of the fastest growing sports in its history in Canada. And
Wow.
those kids that learned how to play golf are now starting to keep track of their scores. And we know this through Golf Canada, who keep track of handicaps, that the request for handicap tracking has gone through the roof. So they got into the game, they started playing it, now they're recording their scores, and it continues to grow. So, even in an environment where golf courses have never been busy, they're still under massive pressure because it's hard to make a buck in this Canadian economy. So I think that's probably the biggest risk, honestly, because
Opportunity.
they really have all the tailwinds. I mean, in Ontario, for example, the premier, I'm not sure what this audience is for this call, but the premier of Ontario has banned the sale of American alcohol at the LCBO stores. And so that's been a tremendous boon for the Canadian wineries, Ontario. Well, I should say specifically Ontario wineries, because we can't buy BC wine in Ontario, but that's a whole other tariff conversation. But for the Ontario wineries and the craft brewers, and then the beer was made available in grocery stores. So they've all had this tremendous tailwind, and yet they're still all struggling. So that's by far the biggest risk. The biggest opportunity, I think, for us, there are 5,000 associations in Canada, and every single one of those associations could very well support a customized commercial insurance program for themselves. So, we really have endless opportunity in terms of developing and launching new programs.
Awesome. Great. So, okay, so you're going to develop and launch the new programs, right? But how do you plan on approaching sales effectiveness training and development, both for yourself, for your brokers, and your team, so that these actually can be, communicated? Fire-focused conversations can actually be initiated. They can actually follow a repeatable, duplicatable, or maybe have some type of process that people can be held accountable to, that can be reinforced, that can be tracked, data driven rather than feelings, happy ears. We're talking about AI and we're talking
Participation medals. Yeah.
Sorry?
Participation medals.
Yeah, but more so.
Listen, I hear what you're saying, and you cannot grow what you do not measure. So, we take KPIs very seriously, and we're leveraging the crap out of technology. The easiest and quickest and most cost-effective differentiator for us versus any of our competitors is a quick response. So if I can get back to you within the same minute or hour or day, that'll separate me from everybody else who's sitting on a big backlog of calls. And so we have spent ruthlessly, and we continue to invest in our CapEx in technology in order to make that possible, because actually building underwriters who can underwrite or insure a golf course properly, that takes a lot of time, and there are not very many people that can do it. In fact, I would say to you that if you can insure a golf course, you can insure anything on the planet. There's nothing more complicated than that. So what I want to do is make sure that the ones that I have, the team that we've built, can handle more business efficiently and properly. And so that's where technology comes in.
So you're no doubt, because of your background and experience, are making sure that all the things that Justine mentioned, that your people are being trained adequately to overcome any kind of challenge. Do you get involved in facilitating any kind of this business development training with any of the brokerages, or you're pretty much leaving that up to them? You're leaving that up to them to work with their own people.
We've tried, and from time to time we'll get approached by a broker who, writes a golf course with us or a campground, an RV park, and they decide that they're going to make that, they're really going to go after every golf course within 45 minutes or an hour of their office and make it, become a true specialist. And we'll do it. We'll co-brand marketing material with them. We'll attend a conference and share a booth with them. And we've had varying degrees of success doing that over the years. But I think, more importantly, it's really about being able to align with the industry associations, being able to put ourselves forward as domain experts, be able to give away all kinds of free and valuable information that helps them better run their businesses. And then when that application does come in, being able to make sure that it's funneled to the right person in a timely manner so that we respond right away and we get it in the pipeline. And then, we go through that clearly defined process as quickly as we can in order to get terms out to them in time and hopefully win the business. So
right.
If we can make life easy for the broker, they'll come back to us.
Well, it sounds like you're laying it right on you're bringing them to low-hanging fruit, right?
That's the goal. Yeah.
And so they're basically fish are jumping into their boat as a result of the activity that you're doing, right?
That's what we're working towards always. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And to make it so that the broker is not so much in sales mode, but in clerk mode, right? They just basically have to clerk, ideally, right? That probably doesn't happen. I'm sure I'm oversimplifying it, but where they a lot of work is done in advance of when they get involved.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
A lot of credibility is established and relationship is established, et cetera, before the broker gets involved.
Yeah, and I think, the most successful people in life recognize that they're not going to be great at everything and that they do need to call in an expert to help them. And if they trust them, then they're probably going to have a better outcome than if they fight it the whole way through. The same goes when you hire an accountant to file your taxes, or you hire a lawyer, or you go to the doctor because you're not feeling well. If you're going to question and battle the doctor the whole way through the diagnosis, it may not turn out as well as it could have. And not to put ourselves anywhere close to that kind of realm of professional, but the brokers who seem to have the most success are the ones who actually trust us. And when we ask them for more information, we may have to explain to them why we need it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But those that get back to us quickest and help us get through the process the most efficiently are usually the ones that win and maintain the business.
Excellent. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, all right. So when you're hiring, salespeople, whatever you want to call them, you want to call them a salesperson, advisor, whatever term, BD, agent, whatever. But they're in a sales role, right? At some level, they may not be called a salesperson, but they are proactively initiating conversations and finding out places where they could fill a need, right? So what some of the greatest challenges that you've experienced so far when hiring these types of people?
They lie.
What? 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 No way. No way.
I've seen a lot of people who have clearly failed upwards their whole life. And we see a lot of really interesting CVs. I think, the challenge for me has been to understand what that person, if we kind of get through the initial screen and they look like they're the right fit, it's then trying to really understand what their strengths are, and help them leverage those, because we're never going to be able to fix things they aren't good at. If they don't want to pick up the phone, they're not going to start picking it up because I tell them to. They'll lie to me, right? So what we've always tried to do is play off the natural strengths that they have, and they may not even be aware of them at the time. And everybody doesn't have to be making outbound phone calls for us to be successful, but figuring out how to kind of slot people together in order to get the job done has really been the trick.
And it's obviously worked out really well. Your company is growing like gangbusters, and
We've been very fortunate, and we've got a great team of people. And I will tell you that some of my best hires have come completely outside of the industry. Who just had like an innate interest in learning, quick studies, street smarts, and as a result, they end up being really good at kind of guessing what the next person's going to ask for next, and getting to the, as Gretzky used to say, go to where the puck's going to be. And we've had some great hires who have come from bizarre industries who have turned out to be phenomenal team members.
Right.
So I think that I would actually add that that being focused on only hiring people with industry experience can be a real mistake sometimes, and you can miss some real gems.
I agree. Yeah, totally. So, but when thinking about your own leadership, what's the hardest adjustment that you've had to make as the company grows?
Well, you start to run out of hours in the day. That's for sure. There's only so long you can go 996. I think it becomes more and more difficult to control the culture. And if you can get the culture internally right, then I have confidence that my people are doing the right thing in their roles as they're interacting with the brokers that they work with on a day-to-day basis. So the larger, and COVID was also a real challenge for us, because we went from everybody kind of being in the core office in a bullpen downtown Toronto. We have people in Quebec and NBC, but the main group was in the city in Toronto. And if you had a question or you weren't sure about something, you could just kind of lean over in your chair and tap someone on the shoulder. What do you think about this? And it's harder to do that over Zoom. So we continue to get the group together, to go to industry events when we can. That's a great excuse to get the team together. We do Zoom calls once a week and check in with the team. And I think as we continue to go forward, that will always be a challenge, for sure.
Got it. Yeah, I'm the same. I totally believe in an open door policy in terms of, like, if you're developing a salesperson, especially at the beginning, and they have questions, you need to be available to answer them. Like, they're going to, in the beginning, it might be a bit annoying, right? It might be a bit annoying that they keep asking.
No, it's always annoying.
Yeah, but you got to have a little grace at the beginning, because
of course,
the more you front load annoying, the faster they can be independent and get up to speed. So
that's right. Yep.
So important to be like, that's why text message. Like, if I got a question, it's just efficient, like great efficiency. WhatsApp, text message, whatever. And people need to feel comfortable to ask questions, as well as making it clear that.
For sure. For sure. If there's any fear there, you're in trouble. But the challenge really is you can't get a vibe for how things work unless you're in the same room with someone who's doing it properly, And we used to take summer interns on. I mean, that was fun for me. And I just can't do it anymore, not because I don't want to, but because there's nothing for them to experience inside the office, and just giving them a spreadsheet and telling them to reorganize data is not interning. You're not learning anything. So that's where we are, right?
Right. That is where we are, but it's good to be aware of it, and so that you can take steps to close that gap. Like, that's why people go to shared office spaces. Like, we're human beings. We need to be around each other. And when when we're physically around each other, in my personal opinion, physically around each other, working towards a common goal, like that's huge, right? So,
Yeah. Osmosis.
yeah, totally. Yeah. All right. Well, coming to the end of the podcast, this has been so great so far. But I would like to ask you one last question, which is my favorite question: is if you
Uh-oh.
could give a if you could give a piece of advice to an Ontario business owner who's just hit a growth ceiling, what would it be?
Huh. Yeah, that's a good one. I think they probably would, someone in that position probably would benefit from talking to to a peer, to someone maybe even in an unrelated industry, um, a mentor of, a father's father or something. Um, I think it's really important, and we certainly learned this back in the original days of Signature, that you have to be, sometimes you need to be outside the box to see what's in it, right? And so I can imagine that it can get tough, and I'm sure I've been in periods like that where it feels like everything's going wrong and I'm not sure if it makes sense to invest in anything anymore, and et cetera, et cetera. But I think just being able to have enough confidence about your business, that you're able to share the difficulties that you're having with people that you trust.
Makes
Be
sense.
part
What
of
about
some
you,
sort
Paul?
of group. Yeah, in other words, be part of some sort of group,
It could
peer
be.
group.
It could be. Sure. Yeah. Why not?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind, I'm thinking of tech, but it could be anything, really, any kind of group where you are, where you can share ideas. And as a CEO, it's like really is like you're not reporting to anybody, right? Unless it's
Right.
publicly traded company or a bank or whatever.
Right.
And so it's kind of lonely. So other people that are at your peer level, be part of some sort of network of people that you can interact with. It
Yeah.
sounds like what you're saying.
But I don't think you need to even be that deliberate about it. I think, for example, I go to a quarterly tech thing. It's just a casual wine and, here are the big ideas that are happening. And I'm surrounded by people who are mostly writing code or architecting code. And the most amazing things can come out of conversations with people who are in completely unrelated industries. So I don't even know that you need to be kind of, sort of that focused on, well, I got to find someone else who's doing exactly what I'm doing.
Oh
And
no,
they have,
no, no, no! I know.
that's the
What I
challenge.
mean is,
Yeah.
what I mean is somebody that's in a senior management role,
Yeah.
like
Yep.
right, regardless of the
Yeah.
industry that they're in. That could be going through the
Mm-hmm.
same kind of thing, or did in a
Yep.
completely unrelated business.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. Or get on a lawnmower and go cut a bunch of grass. That helps too.
yeah. Or jump on a motorcycle and go for a ride, and
Yeah. Yeah. That's, that's a
you,
little more dangerous, but sure.
and you can
Yeah.
yeah, 2
Yeah.
accidents later, I can tell you that it is more dangerous. Uh, but
Mm.
whatever you need to do to get to
Yep.
start thinking, start thinking, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. Cool.
Would you like to share a piece of advice, Paul? If you could give an Ontario business owner who's hit a growth ceiling, what would you say that be?
Well, the thing that I learned from this podcast, listening to James, is uh, like to become really focused in who you're trying to help. So depending on the business you're in, you know, and of course this is going to apply. This can apply to some businesses and to others. But become an expert, not an expert in everything, but an expert in a small number of things where you are intimately familiar with the problems and the solutions that you can help with, and the so that you can accelerate the kind of business that you're doing. Like you may know a lot. You probably know a lot more than you think you do, and to be able to be thinking about, well, what do we know? What are we grateful for that we know? And the more you think about it, the more you realize, hey, we know a lot more here than, there's some things that we haven't thought about that just by getting the thinking juices flowing, right?
Yep.
Like Thomas Watson, the founder of IBM, the sign that was that he had up in Armonk. You walk in, and it's everywhere, right? Think,
Hmm.
and it's easy. It's an easy word to say, but that's kind of helped them at least at the stage they were at, and focus. That's what came to mind as a result of what I've learned here.
Great. Awesome. Well, hey, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, James.
Yeah, been super insightful. I'm sure that there's going to be people in a related industry that are obviously going to get a lot, but also people that aren't in related industries. Just like you kind of said, like there's a lot of senior managers that are running very successful companies that, to the outside, everything looks great, and it is, but it took a lot to get there. It wasn't all sunshine and roses. The things that you see on social media, the fancy posts on LinkedIn, the fancy sponsored posts. That's a just image. That's not what growing a business is about. It's about handling adversity and continuing moving forward and leaning on other people for help as well. So that's at least what I think. But anyways, been a pleasure. Thank you, James. Thank you, Paul. And we'll see you around.
Good. Thank you both.
All right.